Well, we live in a unique period in human history, which is the period of industrialization and, of course, urbanization. And the important point in the background to this, of course, is all driven by the use of fossil fuels. Every year we burn 1 million years worth of fossil fuels, which has made possible, firstly, the new transport systems that we have, global transport systems, the new farming systems, which are all based on fossil fuel technology, but above all else, the cities that we have today. Never before have there been cities of more than 2 million people. When you look back in history, the largest cities reached about that size. Rome was 2,000 years ago was 1 million, but for instance, Beijing in the 17th century was 2 million, and Shah Jahanabad, the predecessor to Delhi, was about 2 million. That was sort of pretty much the cut-off point of cities that were supplied with lots of canals and that type of transport systems. When the Industrial Revolution happened, suddenly everything changed. It was possible to bunch together huge numbers of people in very compact urban developments. And today we have 80% of people living in cities in the developed countries, such as in Europe and the United States and South America as well, 50% worldwide, but with a rapid process underway for urbanization to take place in the developed world. And of course, the very largest cities are primarily in those countries there where there's still tremendous poverty in rural areas. So urbanization today is driven above all else by the opportunities that people see in cities for new jobs, for housing themselves and their families. Even if they happen to be slums initially, gradually people reckon they can upgrade their lifestyles and improve their lot by moving to cities. And certainly that is behind this incredible global process of urbanization that we are seeing across the planet today. This very process of urbanization is still taking place at a time when the very basis of this process is being undermined by the fact that suddenly it is becoming apparent that fossil fuels are not there forever. That it is quite possible that within a decade or so, much of the infrastructure that makes cities possible will no longer be viable financially in the way that it currently is. So cities are facing an extraordinary problem. On the one hand, they are relying on fossil fuels to grow and to exist. On the other hand, they will not only be faced with potential fuel shortages, certainly of cheap fuel, but also they will be the main victims of climate change, which they are the main contributors to. So you have this massive demand for resources, and particularly fossil fuel resources by cities on the one hand, but half the world's cities are in coastal areas and a lot of the rest are in river valleys, and both of those are prone to the effects of climate change. We now know that we are likely to have sea level rises this century that could be several meters rather than several centimeters, as was until recently anticipated. So suddenly we are faced with the prospect of the very places that are so dependent on fossil fuels could become be at the receiving end of this huge boomerang of climate change, flooding cities and farmland feeding cities that is a real prospect for the coming decades. So we need a massive change in direction, not only in terms of how the process of urbanization itself takes place. We need to ask the question, is it realistic for more and more people to move to cities? Would it not make sense to try and resuscitate rural lifestyles and village lifestyles and encourage farming, including the production of fuel from farmland for the future? But at the same time, we need to also reconceptualize the way cities work and not be fossil fuel junkies the way they are at the present time, but instead to get cities to run on the power of the wind and the sun and of the tidal power offshore, in coastal regions. And that is perfectly possible. Obviously, all of that also requires us to be much more frugal in the way we use energy, which means new approaches to the design of transport systems themselves, much less reliance on the private motor car, the redesign of buildings, both new buildings that are going to be put up in the years to come, but also retrofitting existing buildings, which is perfectly possible, making buildings and just generally our lifestyles much more efficient in the use of energy. And that means a new investment in alternative ways of doing things. We cannot simply rely on fossil fuels to be the future for us. It's impossible to think about that in practical terms.